Hey everybody, Tosan here with a Keybind and macro guide for Subtlety Rogue, although this will kind of apply to Rogue in general. So first off, when it comes to keybinds, like I said in my Hunter Keybind and macro guide, keybinds are for the most part preference. So, there's no strict rules you have to follow when it comes to keybinding, it's just whatever's really comfortable for you. So the only thing that I would really recommend as far as keybinds go is just the most frequently used abilities on your bar, the ones that you're going to be using very often, should be the most comfortable to push. So all the closest keybinds around your WASD, the ones that are most easy to tap really quickly, should be reserved for your most frequently used or spammable abilities. Things like Kidney Shot, Backstab, or Gloom Blade rather, or Shadow Strike, Eviscerate. All those are pretty obviously, frequently used abilities, so you want them on an easy to use keybind. So for the most part, most of my keybinds for my, very frequently used abilities are just like 2 through 6. I know for a lot of people you're like 6, that's not very reachable, but I don't know. A lot of people are perplexed by it. I guess I have relatively big hands or something because I don't have a problem pressing 6 for Kidney Shot. It's been that way since vanilla. But I have, for instance, Nightblade on Shift 2. Shift 3 is Gormal's Bite. Shift 4 is Shadow Dance. That's generally where my major cooldown is, like Killing Spree or Shadow Dance, stuff like that, Vendetta. And then Shift 5 is Shadow Blades. And then I have 2 for Gloom Blade, 3 for Eviscerate, 4 for a macro that doubles as Shadow Strike and Gloom Blade. I'll talk about that in a sec. And then 5 is Shuriken Storm, 6 is Kidney Shot. E is Marked for Death, or DFA. And then Cheap Shot, because you're Shadow Dancing and you're going to Cheap Shot very often, I have that on Q. Q is a very easily reached keybind. And same with R for Shadow Step. So Q, E, R, all these abilities. T is my Feint. All these very frequently used abilities are all right around WASD. And then, I reserve the more awkward keybinds for less frequently used abilities, like Control X is my heal, the Crimson Vial, because you don't press that often. So, for keybinds, nothing too important. The only thing I would recommend, as I did with Hunter, is you can go into keybinds, and for targeting, for instance, if you want to use Arena 1, 2, 3 target macros and stuff like that, you can find that here. Target enemy 1, 2, 3 for Arena. I don't really use them anymore. I tried for a while and I couldn't get comfortable with it. So if you can get comfortable with Arena 1, 2, 3, they are very efficient to use. I generally click or tab target, which works out fine in the vast majority of situations. And every once in a while, if a Hunter feign deaths with a bunch of pets and totem nameplates and stuff around him, it can be annoying to retarget them because I'll have to click the arena frame, but it's really not that big of a deal. So if you can get used to target enemies 1 through 3, I would recommend it, but if you're like me and you just can't get used to it, don't worry about it. What I will recommend though is quickly setting focus, because you have a lot of focus macros you're going to want to use. Focus Kick, Focus Cheap Shot, Focus Kidney Shot, Shadow Step, Focus Kidney Shot, all this sort of stuff. So you're going to definitely want to be able to set focuses very quickly. So what I have is my mouse scroll wheel. Scroll wheel up is Arena 1 focus. Pressing the middle mouse button is Arena 2. And scrolling down is Arena 3. So I find that very handy. And then if you want to set a default set focus keybind, you can set that right here. Mine is Control F. So if I just want to target something and set focus, just hit Control F. This is good in random situations, world PvP, battlegrounds, whatever, if you want to set a focus very quickly. So for keybinds, that's about it. As far as macros go, we've got some very handy macros to share with you guys. This one is a macro that will double as a Backstab and Shadow Strike keybind, or Gloom Blade, which you generally take for PvP. So it'll sit there and show the Gloom Blade tooltip, right? But when I'm dancing, it will Shadow Strike automatically. Notice it's Shadow Striking instead of Gloom Blade. You can tell by the cool animation. So this is a good way to compact that keybind. To where if you're dancing or you're stealth, it'll automatically Shadow Strike. Very handy. Now, I do have a separate keybind for Gloom Blade, however, and the reason you want this is because there are situations, remember Gloom Blade is shadow damage, therefore magic, so it goes through physical things. And Shadow Strike, although Shadow Strike is always better to use in pretty much every situation because it does a lot more damage, the situations that you want to use Gloom Blade, for example, are against Blessing of Protection or an Enhanced Shaman using Ethereal Form. Gloom Blade will actually kill them through that if they're low enough. So there's a lot of situations where Paladin bops himself or his teammate at 20% health, and I'm Shadow Dancing, and this keybind will automatically Shadow Strike, and I don't want to Shadow Strike, so I have a separate keybind on 2 for Gloom Blade for those situations. So I highly recommend that, and I highly recommend using this macro as your main attack button. Then another really handy macro is the level 100 talent tree. If you want to switch between, you know, DFA and Marked for Death, which you will sometimes, you can use this macro here to where you can just have that on your bar all the time, and you don't have to worry about switching and dragging it all the time. So that's very handy. And then of course you want all your focus macros: focus blind, focus cheap shot, focus kidney shot, etc. Now notice I have the exclamation stealth command in a lot of my macros. You know, blind, cheap shot. You can pretty much put this in just about any macro and it's a good idea. And the reason why that's a good idea is because there's no penalty for randomly stealthing. Sometimes you get out of combat and you didn't expect to, and you're pressing a macro, right? And you'll just, let's say I'm trying to focus blind, I'm running over to a healer and I want to blind him, right? I'm hitting my focus blind macro. Well, I might just randomly exit combat and then blind him, and then I'm sitting in stealth and I get a new stealth opener, which is really good. So there's a lot of situations where you might drop combat, and having the stealth, you know, into the macro is usually a good idea. It's only a 2-second cooldown, so it really can't screw you up in any situations. And then for my Shadow Dance burst macro, it has /use 14, which is your on use, you know, this is 13 and 14 for trinket slots. I always put that in there because I typically put on use on 14 if I have it. Of course, this doesn't work in PvP instances, only for World PvP and stuff like that, or PvE, so it's still handy to have. Now, I also have Symbols of Death macroed with Shadow Dance. I don't necessarily think this is like an absolutely mandatory thing or anything like that. The reason I do it is because even if I open on somebody and I instantly pop Dance to do big damage, usually I'm going to have full or nearly full energy, so Symbols of Death is going to waste a little bit of the energy restore in that scenario. However, I find that I'm rarely energy starved in PvP situations, first off, and secondly, usually when you're dancing and you're going hard, you're going to want to pop Symbols of Death, screw the energy, you want the 15% damage. So when you're opening on somebody and you're trying to go hard and do the biggest burst you can possibly do, you're going to want that 15% damage. So I just macro them together because so far I haven't come in a situation where I'm like, darn, I wish I didn't use Symbols of Death when I danced there. You know, that almost never happens. The only situation where that could happen is if you are going to Shadow Dance, focus cheap shot a healer, and then, you know, go and do damage to another target. You could have been a little more efficient and spent the energy first, and then restored the energy and gotten a longer duration. So if you want to just keybind it separately and not macro it, that's totally cool. That's up to you. I haven't found a problem with it yet. It's probably better to keybind it separately, but it's just another button you're going to have to press when you're doing your big burst rotation and stuff like that. So, you know, make the choice on your own if you want to do it or not, or just learn to keybind it separately. But you still should keybind it separately regardless, because there are situations where Shadow Dance is on cooldown and you desperately need to restore some energy. So it's good to have it separate keybinding anyway. And then after that I have, you know, a basic Crimson Vial Health Stone keybind. Just combine them together so you can save a keybind for Health Stone, because usually you're going to use this when you're in trouble anyway. And then of course Focus Kick modifier keybind. This just saves me a keybind even though I don't really need to because I have keybind space, but I use this for everything. And then of course you want all your focus keybinds. You want to focus blind, focus cheap shot, focus kidney shot, focus kick. You want to focus shadow step kidney shot, a focus shadow step kick. I don't even have room for a focus shadow step cheap shot bind. I rarely need to use it, and I usually just target the healer, shadow step to them, cheap shot. It's not a big deal. I can't find a comfortable bind for that yet, but if you can, go for it. You know, the more easy macros you have memorized, the better for most situations. But besides that, you want macros, of course, for Tricks of the Trade for your teammates, just in case you're ever using Thieves' Gambit. Although it wasn't nerfed recently and it's not as good, still nice to have those keybinds just in case you take this for whatever reason. And then lastly, you're going to want some Cancel Aura macros in, I typically put my Cancel Auras in my Mount macro. I find this very handy because you're never going to accidentally hit your Mount macro. My Mount macro is Shift Y, right? And you're never going to accidentally try to press that in combat and accidentally cancel a Blessing of Protection when you didn't want to. So things like Killing Spree, Levitate, Levitate's annoying sometimes. Blessing of Protection, if you don't want to, you know, let's say you're playing with the Paladin, you get Blessing of Protection, you don't want the Mage to spell steal it, you want to cancel it, you know, just in case he's going to spell steal it. So having a Cancel Aura for that is really important. And Cancel Aura Stealth, so you don't have to click off your Stealth, because the exclamation stealth macro that I have means I can spam it and not accidentally come out of stealth. So the only way I can really come out of stealth is either to right click the buff off, which is annoying, or I can press my Mount macro and come out. And you might say, why would you ever want to come out of stealth? There are some situations where you do want to come out of stealth, so it's handy to have the Cancel Aura macros there. So highly recommend having this in your Mount macro. Besides that, I think that just about covers it. Don't forget to subscribe and like and all that stuff, and share it with anybody that might find it useful. Thanks for watching as always, guys, and peace out. Also, guys, in the info section of this video, you can find a link to Pastebin, where you can find all of my macros, and feel free to copy and paste any of the ones you want to use. Anyway, I hope some of you found this guide useful. Thanks for watching as always, and peace out.